Russian President Vladimir Putin has put Russia's deterrence forces, nuclear forces, on high alert. And this is following a slew of economic sanctions against Russia. And I'm going to play to you the announcement when Putin was sitting with his cabinet and informing them of this decision and giving them the orders.
Уважаемые коллеги, вы видите, что западные страны предпринимают не только... Уважаемые коллеги, вы видите, что западные страны предпринимают не только недружественные действия в отношении нашей страны в экономической сфере, я имею в виду нелегитимные санкции, о которых все хорошо знают, но высшие должностные лица ведущих стран НАТО допускают и агрессивные высказывания в адрес нашей страны. Поэтому приказываю министру обороны и начальнику генерального штаба перевести силы сдерживания российской армии в особый режим несения боевого дежурства.
Yeah, so you've had a lot of memes online about his defense minister's face. He doesn't look too happy. Shoigu is his name, right? And the table also, you know, apparently the Kremlin, they just love these long tables. I'm sure you've seen the memes with the French President Emmanuel Macron sitting, you know, right opposite Vladimir Putin on some like 20-meter table. Well, here's one of those again. In any case, I don't know whether, I mean, I'm not going to gauge the defense minister's emotions based on some frame, but in any case, that's what people are saying. Let me show you the response from the West. I'm going to show you the response from Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson, the head of NATO, and a bunch of others. Take a look at their reaction to Putin putting Russia's nuclear forces on high alert.
This is really a pattern that we've seen from President Putin through the course of this conflict, which is manufacturing threats that don't exist in order to justify further aggression. And the global community and the American people should look at it through that prism. We've seen him do this time and time again. At no point has Russia been under threat from NATO, has Russia been under threat from Ukraine. This is all...
I'm sorry, I had to laugh at that. That's just...
all a pattern from President Putin, and we're going to stand up for it. We have the ability to defend ourselves, but we also need to call out what we're seeing here from President Putin.
This is dangerous rhetoric. This is a behavior which is irresponsible, and of course, if you combine this rhetoric with what they are doing on the ground in Ukraine, waging war against the independent sovereign nation. Conducting full-fledged invasion of Ukraine, this adds to the seriousness of the situation.
I'm not surprised at this information because Putin has tried every means possible to actually put fear in the world in terms of his action, and it just means that we have to ramp up our efforts here at the United Nations and elsewhere to hold him accountable.
So that at the end was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Greenfield. And, well, I mean, you can see what they're saying, right? They find this deplorable. They say it's nonsensical. It's reckless. I mean, I'm going to break this down to you. I know most of you already know this, but I'm going to explain it anyway for those who don't. You know, you have a term that comes from the Cold War, which is mutually assured destruction. It's aptly named MAD, right? That's the acronym. And so the idea behind this is that, well, if the United States launches a nuclear weapon at Russia, Russia can also launch nuclear weapons at the United States, right? Even if they take out the capital, for example, even if they take out Moscow, Russia has nuclear submarines. So not just nuclear powered, nuclear armed as well. They have a nuclear payload on board that are, no one knows where they are. This is very, you know, the countries that have these submarines, they keep this very classified for obvious reasons. And so, you know, even if the capitals take out, even if the entire Russian country is taken out, you have Russian submarines in the oceans on the planet that can launch nuclear missiles at the United States and also, you know, do the same and reciprocate the favor. And so, the other way around, vice versa. Now, Russia has more nuclear weapons than anyone, actually. So, there have been efforts in the past to reduce the nuclear arsenal on both sides. Let me just show you very quickly over here. You can see this is from Metro, right? You can see Russia has 6,257 nuclear weapons. The United States has 5,550. I mean, I'm gonna say this very simply. The number doesn't matter. Just a dozen of those are enough to just destroy the entire planet. You don't need 5,000. It's really the definition. It's the embodiment of the arms race and how senseless it is. But in any case, this dynamic continued past the Cold War, right? The Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Nevertheless, there is a balance of power in the world. And so I just find it a bit funny that they're appalled by Vladimir Putin putting Russia's nuclear forces on high alert. Because I can bet you your ass, the United States has done the same. They refuse to disclose the status. So it's not like they've denied it. They just won't tell us. Of course they have it on high alert. Absolutely, right? They have these different DEFCON stages. And so what's funny to me is that they're calling this reckless and a show of force because, Russia has been disconnected from SWIFT, not completely, but in part, and I'm going to get into that separately in a moment. SWIFT is an international banking system, right? And it's basically a form of sanctions, a punishment that they've taken against Russia. And so as a result, this is the announcement from Putin. How come? Well, disconnecting Russia from SWIFT has always been labeled a so-called nuclear option because financially speaking, it's so outrageous. You can really, really cripple a country's economy from that if they're disconnected from the rest of the world. And so they haven't done this completely to Russia, but they have taken these measures, right, to put sanctions on Russia in all sorts of ways, including partial removal from SWIFT. And so the response from Putin the same day has been, we're going to raise the alert level in our deterrent forces. Again, deterrence in this case means nuclear, to high. And what that means concretely, I mean, again, I told you about the submarines. The submarines are ready to go at a moment's notice, right? They're already deployed in the oceans. They can launch at a moment's notice. And as a matter of fact, even if the capital is taken out, they have protocols for them to act independently if they cannot receive orders anymore. Okay, so they have a whole system set up for that. And the other thing, the silos is also another thing. But when it comes to bombers, nuclear bombers, that maybe is what he means. So, for example, the flight crews will be put on alerts. They might be refueling the nuclear bombers. It doesn't mean, again, let me be clear, no one is going to bomb anyone right now. They're just getting ready to do that as a threat. So what Putin is doing here is basically signaling to the Americans, you better stop messing around. Because if you're going to go nuclear on our finances, we're ready to pop off as well. I do find it kind of... it is, really primitive in a way what the nuclear powers do, whether it's UK or anyone else with this deterrence. But the hypocrisy is funny because I can just point to a few examples. Last year, so this is early 2021, the United States was flying its B-52 nuclear bombers, not over Iran, but right next to Iran, right? So that's what they call a show of force. And that's what Putin is doing here. It's a show of force. It's like, you better back off. It's like gorillas going like this, or a peacock, spreading the feathers and everything. It's back off. And I just find it funny because when the United States does it, they call it a show of force. There's nothing wrong with it. Of course we're sending an aircraft carrier. We, meaning the Americans, are sending an aircraft carrier to the Persian Gulf. Of course we're going to do a flyover of B-52s right next to Iran to provoke them and show them who's boss. That's totally fine. Oh, it's a show of force, But when Russia does it, it's reckless. Oh, my God. I mean, you have to admit there's a double standard here. There is a double standard. And again, it's really kind of like, someone just walking outside your house, not attacking you, but they're holding a machine gun and just walking like that, giving you looks. That's what it is on an international scope, on an international level. And so, I mean, of course, I don't need to tell you that other countries have nukes. The UK, Israel has an undeclared arsenal. China, North Korea, India, Pakistan, France. Notice how Iran is not on the map. But again, that's another issue. Now, this is also something else I wanted to show you. This is from back in 2019, I believe this was. Again, forgive me, I know it's Daily Mail, but I'm interested in the map. You can see how the Russian submarines have done exercises before where they can get very, very close to the U.S. I mean, to be fair, I remember in World War II, the Germans were already, bringing their submarines off the coast of New York to see how far they could go in all of this. So every country has a way to deter the other, specifically the nuclear powers nowadays. And I really think the hypocrisy is staggering, because when the US and the UK and the Western powers do it, it's a show of force. There's nothing wrong with it. We're establishing our dominance. But when Russia does it, it's not even really a flyover. They're not actually flying bombers anywhere. It's just like, we're getting them ready just in case, because you've gone nuclear on our economy. And then they start acting like it's worse than what they do. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. I don't think anyone should be using bloody nukes, but it is hypocritical. And I think that Russia has been very clear before that if they get disconnected from SWIFT, from the international banking system, they would consider that as an act of war. And so my point here, what you guys need to understand, is that just because the West take measures like sanctions, or they punish countries economically, don't think for 1 second that it's not warfare, right? Because some people might be scratching their heads. Well, like, don't you think that's a bit of an exaggeration? Why are you responding with getting your nuclear forces on high alert to some sanctions? No, you don't get it. You don't get it. Siege warfare, when they used to besiege a city in the Middle Ages or whatever, they, in old days, they would encircle your city. Back then, cities had walls, and they would just starve you out. They'd make sure no food is coming in. You would die from disease or starvation or whatever it is, right? They would besiege you. And this is the same thing. It's just being done in a modern way, right? It's being done on an international scale. So they're starving countries out with sanctions. They do this with Syria. Syria right now, for example, 80% of the population are below the poverty line. I can assure you that was not because of Bashar al-Assad. Okay, that was not the case before 2011. That's a result of the war and specifically the sanctions. And so Iran as well has suffered because of sanctions. Cuba has been under an embargo for 60 years. Disconnecting a country from SWIFT, again, I'm going to have a whole segment on that in just a moment. It's really an act of war in many ways, because you are basically saying we are coming to starve you. So whether you kill people with bombs or by starving them, the result is quite the same. And the disruption that it does to the country's economy, to Russia's economy, is quite large, right? So again, I just wanted to give you this quick update. Hopefully nothing comes of it. During the Cold War, there were much worse moments than this. And thankfully, war was averted. So we can only hope for the best and that everything is going to be okay. But don't think that other countries don't see economic sanctions as something peaceful or some kind of, some mild remedial measure. No, they really, this hurts people and they take this seriously. And the United States, I'm pretty sure, would do the same if something of a similar caliber or something on a similar scale were done to them. So that's very, very important to keep in mind.